every time I walked into my business, I just I think that was the scene of the crime. I could still see myself on the floor. I would see, what I mean? It just never went away. It just was it was always there. I went in to get a cup of coffee. I parked in front of the cafe. When I came out, there was a police officer behind my car, and he had his lights on, but there was obviously, he wasn't pulling anybody over. I assumed I was parked legally. So I get in my car, and I leave, and he immediately turns on his siren and pulls me over. So literally I get to the next intersection, just to the other side of the intersection. So I was on the corner of LaSalle and East 185th. So I get just to the other side of the intersection, and he comes over to the car, and he throws a ticket at me. He's like, "Here, I was in the process of filling this out when you were moving away." So I look at the ticket, and I'm like, it doesn't really say what the ticket's for. It just shows that there's a ticket, parking ticket. And I'm like, well, I was parked legally, so I can't imagine why he's giving me a parking ticket. So I get out of the car, and I said, "Hey," I was like, "I got a question for you." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "What is this? I don't know what this ticket's for." And he says, "You're parked illegally." And I was like, so I start walking towards the sign because I'm going to show him the sign. I'm like, "No, I'm parked legally. I can park here." He says, "No, you're parked too close to the intersection." I said, "How can I be parked too close to the intersection?" Because I was like, "There's a sign here that says I can park here." And he's like, "Just get back in your car." I'm like, "I'm just asking a legitimate question." He's like, "Put your hands up against the car." And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I'm not putting my hands up against the car. I haven't done anything. I'm just asking you a question about, this parking ticket." And he's like, "Put your hands up against the car." I'm like, "For what?" I'm like, "Well, I haven't done anything." He's like, "You're assaulting me." And then he grabbed me and threw me against the car, and attempted to put handcuffs on me, but I slipped out of my shirt that I was wearing. I had a fleece on with the t-shirt on under it, and both the fleece and the t-shirt came off. And I ran inside the restaurant.
Why did you do that?
I didn't know what to do. I was just there was nobody on the street that I could see. I was like, so what am I going to do? Right. I was like, I'm going to go get help, because this guy's crazy. I started screaming, for help or whatever, but there was nobody there, obviously. It was a quick struggle. I mean, it happened pretty fast. But then I run inside the restaurant. The door closes because it's on a plunger. So when he went to open the door, he actually tripped and fell, and then got up, came inside, and I ran inside. Was like, call the police, not thinking about the fact that
that's ironic
that more
he is the police,
that more police are going to come.
Right.
So anyway, I'm not wearing a shirt, so he grabs me by my throat.
Are there people in the coffee shop?
Yeah, the place is full. There's probably about 20 people in the place at the time. So anyway, he grabbed me by my throat and threw me down to the ground. I tried to get back up, and he cracked me in the back of my head with his flashlight. And then I got back up again, and he threw me into, there were shelves of retail, coffee mugs and things that were for sale. Threw me into the shelf of coffee mugs, and there was glass everywhere. And then he cracked me over the head, in front of my head, so I was bleeding at that point. And then pinned me to the ground, kneeled on my legs, and was strangling me essentially.
With his hands around your
with his hands around my neck, until the other police officers came, and I don't know how long that was, maybe a minute or so. I mean, because they came pretty quick, it seemed like. And then they put handcuffs on me, and they put them on so tight that I just kept asking them to loosen them. I'm I have no clue what's going on. I'm I'm completely disoriented, and they assume that I'm on drugs or something. So they just assume because the other police officers really don't know what happened. So they apprehend me. They put me in an ambulance because I'm bleeding profusely because they cracked my head open in the front. I asked the police officer. I said, what's the plan? I was like, when do I get to go home? He's like, home? He's like, you're not going home. He's like, you're charged with a felony.
Was this the same officer?
No, this is a different. This is a different officer. That officer was gone. And he's like, you're charged with a felony. I'm a felony. I'm like, for what? He's like, felonious assault on a police officer. I'm like, I never touched the police officer. So this is really confusing. And then I found out that I was also charged with failure to comply and resisting arrest, which were both misdemeanors, and then also the parking ticket. It ended up that all the charges were dropped, essentially. It took probably about 7 months. Something has to change with the way these people are trained to apprehend people. You can't assume that because somebody has a gun or a knife, or that they just might get, because they get out of their car, that they're dangerous. There's got to be a better way to apprehend people than to just use like deadly force. I'm lucky that he didn't pull out his gun that night and try to shoot me when I was running. I didn't, none of that was running through my head at that moment, but like in retrospect, when I think back, he could have shot me. He could have tased me, he could have shot me, who knows what he could have done. I'm probably lucky that he just beat me.